A cold wind blew through the streets of the old European city. It was close to midnight. The rain was falling lightly, but it was enough to make the air bitter and sharp. Streetlights flickered in patches. The city was quiet except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. Layla sat on a broken wooden bench under a shattered bus stop shelter. Her coat was too thin, soaked from the rain. Her hands shook, not just from the cold but from fear and hunger. She held her son close to her chest, wrapping her arms around him tightly. He was only 7 years old. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue. "Just a little longer," she whispered, pressing her cheek against his wet hair. Just until morning. They had been sleeping outside for 3 nights now. No shelters had space. No one wanted to ask who she really was, and that was a good thing. Because if anyone did recognize her, they might call the wrong people. In the distance, the low hum of a car engine broke the silence. Layla looked up. A black car was slowly approaching the bus stop. Its headlights cut through the fog and rain. Her body tensed. Was it him? Had they found her? Her heart raced. The car stopped right in front of her. She held her son tighter, her eyes searching for a way to escape. There was none. The alley behind her was dark. The road ahead was empty. She was cornered. The window rolled down. A man in a dark suit leaned forward. He didn't look like a soldier. No gun, no uniform, just calm eyes and a calm voice. "Layla." "Khan?" he asked quietly, without surprise. She didn't answer. "We know who you are," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you. I work for Global Current Affairs. Our anchor, George Arnault, wants to speak with you." Layla froze. George Arnault, the world-famous investigative journalist, host of the most watched news show on the planet. He only interviewed presidents, whistleblowers, fugitives. "Why me?" she asked, her voice rough from days without rest. "Because you're not just a homeless mother," the man said. "You're the woman who disappeared after exposing the man who's now a prime minister." Layla looked down at her son. He was still asleep in her arms. "You're asking me to risk everything," she said. "Again." "You already risked everything," the man replied. "Now it's time the world hears the truth. From you, Liv." She hesitated. Her whole body ached. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Her son needed warmth, safety, a place to breathe. And deep inside her, she was tired of running. She stood up slowly, her knees weak. The man got out of the car and opened the back door. "Please," he said, "come with us. You'll be safe." Layla lifted her son gently and placed him inside the warm car. Then she followed. As the door shut, the noise of the city vanished. Inside, it was quiet, clean. The heat wrapped around her like a blanket. She didn't speak for the next 20 minutes as the car drove through the city. Passing buildings she used to walk by freely. Back when she had a name that carried weight, when she was respected, feared even. Before the betrayal, before the violence, before she had to become invisible. The car stopped in front of a large glass building. Inside were news desks, giant monitors, and people moving with purpose. She was rushed through a back entrance. Her son was taken to a warm room with food, toys, and a kind nurse. Layla was given dry clothes, nothing fancy, just enough to feel human again. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was thinner, bruised, but her eyes still burned. Then she was led to a quiet hallway. At the end of it, George Arnault stood waiting. Tall, serious, dressed in a gray suit. His face was known across the world. People trusted him, feared him. Politicians avoided him. But tonight, he looked at her with something else. Respect. "Layla," he said, "we've waited a long time to find you." She said nothing. He held up a folder. "We've verified your identity. We know what you've been through. We know what he did. And we know why you ran." She lowered her eyes. "We're going live in 10 minutes, he said. "No filters, no edits, just your voice." "I don't want revenge," she said softly. I want to be left alone. This might be the only way to make that happen, George replied, because he's not going to stop hunting you. But if the world sees you, if they hear everything, he won't be able to silence you again. Layla nodded slowly. She wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for her son, for the truth. For the part of her that still believed justice mattered. The studio lights were bright. She sat across from George at a long black table, cameras focused on her face. She could feel the entire world about to watch. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. George spoke directly into the camera. Tonight, you will meet a woman who vanished from history. A mother, a whistleblower, and possibly the key to uncovering crimes at the highest level of power. He turned to Layla. Layla Khan, thank you for being here. Layla took a deep breath. And then she began. The studio was silent except for the hum of the live feed and the quiet rustle of camera equipment. All eyes were on Layla. She sat upright, hands clasped in her lap, her face calm but pale under the lights. George Arno leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. Where have you been these last 10 years? He asked. Layla looked into the camera, then down at her hands. Her voice was soft but clear. Everywhere and nowhere, she said. Mostly running, hiding, surviving. George didn't interrupt. I changed names, lived in small towns. I cleaned floors in hotels, sold food on streets. I kept my head low. I did everything I could to stay away from anyone who might ask questions. Who were you running from? George asked. She paused. My husband, she replied. Prime Minister Rafiq Saeed. There was a beat of silence in the room. On screen, a live banner flashed red. Breaking, woman claims to be PM Zahid's ex-wife. Social media lit up instantly. The internet exploded with questions. Commentators from around the world rushed to verify her face, her voice, her past. George leaned back slightly, his tone unchanged. You're saying you were married to one of the most powerful leaders in the world? Yes, she said. Before the elections, before the power, before the lies. A photo appeared on screen, old, grainy, but clear. Layla, younger and smiling, standing beside a man in military uniform. It was Zahid before he became prime minister. The resemblance was undeniable. That picture was taken in 2010. She said we were married in secret, was rising fast in the military. I was working with a legal reform group, quietly supporting journalists, helping women file cases against generals. He liked that about me. Until he didn't. George raised an eyebrow. What changed? I found something I wasn't supposed to. She adjusted her hands as if steadying herself. It was a file, a list of names, bank accounts, dates, payments, weapons transfers between government forces and a Russian contact. George nodded slowly. An arms deal. Layla nodded. Illegal. Hidden under humanitarian aid contracts. I made a copy. I asked him about it. That night, he hit me for the first time. The studio was quiet. No one moved. I thought it was a mistake, Layla continued. But then I realized he was already turning into something else, something dangerous. He told me, if you speak, no one will ever find your body. George's voice lowered. So what did you do? I ran, she said. Took my baby. Disappeared. I thought I'd be safe. But he became more powerful than I imagined. When he won the election, I knew I'd never be safe again. George glanced at a screen to his right. A note had appeared from his producer, confirmed by embassy source, Layla Khan listed as missing. 2012. Report sealed. He looked back at Layla. You say you have proof? Where is it? Layla didn't answer immediately. I left it with someone, she said finally. Years ago? I knew if I kept it, I'd be dead. I trusted her. I think she still has it. Can you tell us who? Layla shook her head. Not yet. If I speak her name now, she'll be in danger, just like I was. George respected the pause. Then he asked, "Why now? Why come forward?" After all this time, Layla's voice broke slightly. "'Cause of my son. He's asking questions. He deserves answers. He deserves a future where he doesn't have to hide." George leaned forward again. "What do you want people to know? Tonight?" Layla looked into the camera. Her face was firm now. "I want them to know that Rafiq Saeed is not who he says he is. He talks about justice and progress, but behind the scenes, he kills truth. He buys silence. Now he won't stop until every witness is erased." She took a breath. "I was his wife. I saw the monster before the world saw the leader." The feed was now airing in over 30 countries, in cafes, airports, and homes across the world. People were watching. In Zahid's country, the national media scrambled to block the transmission, but clips were already going viral. Back in the newsroom, George glanced at another update. "Your claims are serious, Layla," he said. "Some might say you're lying, that you're seeking revenge." "I would rather stay silent than lie," she said. "But silence hasn't saved me." Just then, a staff member walked into the studio holding a tablet. He whispered something in George's ear. George nodded, his face suddenly sharp. "We've just received confirmation from a source inside British intelligence," he said. "There are sealed records connected to a woman matching your identity. It appears someone tried to erase your existence." Layla's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "You can erase files," she said, "but not memory, not pain, and not truth." The camera zoomed in on her face. George looked directly into the lens. "Tonight, you've heard one side of it." Rain hit the glass walls of the news studio as the broadcast ended. Inside, the air felt heavy. Layla sat in silence, staring at the black screen in front of her where her face had been only seconds ago. The moment felt surreal. Outside, people across the world were reacting. Social media was in chaos. #Layla Khan was trending in over 20 countries. Some called her a hero. Others called her a liar. But no one could ignore her now. George placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did well," he said, "but things will move fast now. Be ready?" Layla didn't answer. She looked down at the floor, lost in thought. Then she whispered, "They'll come for me." "We're increasing security," George said. "You're safe here." She gave a faint smile. "There's no such thing as safe. Not with him." Few floors below, the news team was working overtime. Phones ringing, analysts digging through old archives. Legal experts scanning through sealed embassy reports. And somewhere in London, a woman named Sophia Rahman watched the interview from a dim apartment. A glass of water in her trembling hand. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. She hadn't seen Layla in over 10 years. Sophia was a mid-level analyst with access to intelligence databases. She once worked closely with diplomats who knew Layla's husband, Prime Minister Zahid. Then she and Layla had exchanged encrypted messages, warnings, fears, truths too dangerous to write on paper. Now those secrets were surfacing again. Sophia opened her old secure drive and typed in a long password. The screen blinked. Inside the folder were dozens of files, documents, photos, and one video, the one Layla had left with her before disappearing. She stared at the file name RZ_wartrade_2011.mp, for Sophia whispered to herself. She wasn't lying. Meanwhile, back in the newsroom, George gathered his senior team. "She says she has proof," he said. "We need that video. If she's telling the truth, it's going to be the biggest political scandal in decades." Intelligence sources are watching. One producer said, "Saeed feels exposed. He could retaliate, especially if the Russians are involved." George nodded. "And the arms deal?" "Nothing on record. But rumors go back years. Weapons move through aid channels, shady partnerships in Eastern Europe. If Layla's video confirms it, it links Saeed to international war crimes." Another producer added, "We're getting calls from embassies, Even NATO is watching. Upstairs, Layla sat alone in a quiet room. Her son was asleep on a couch. Beside her, his small hand rested against her arm. She brushed his hair gently. Her mind drifted to the past. 12 years ago, she was in Islamabad. The air was thick with heat and dust. She worked as a legal advisor to a nonprofit, helping victims of military abuse file cases. It was dangerous work, but she believed in it. Rafiq Zahid was a rising star, then a decorated officer, known for his charm and discipline. He spoke about reform, progress, and democracy. Layla had believed him. Right, they met at a conference. He admired her intelligence. She admired his confidence. The affair started quietly. No one knew they were married, not even his own family. But things changed quickly. One night, Layla stayed late at his apartment while he was away. A messenger dropped off a package, an unmarked folder meant for Zahid. She opened it. Inside were detailed logs, millions of dollars in cash transfers, weapons lists, coded names, and a signature that sent a chill through her, Zahid's. The next morning she confronted him. He didn't deny it. "You're not supposed to see this," he said coldly. "This is treason," she had whispered. "These weapons, these are going to private militias. You're selling them through Russian middlemen." He slapped her so hard she fell to the ground. Her cheek burned for hours. That night she took their son and fled. She'd never stopped looking over her shoulder. Now the world was finally catching up. Back in the present, Layla heard a soft knock. George entered the room. He looked tired but focused. "We might have a lead on the proof," he said. "An old contact of yours, Sophia Rahman." "Does that name mean anything?" Layla nodded slowly. "She's the only person I ever trusted." "She just contacted us," George said. "She says she still has the video." Layla's eyes filled with tears. "She kept it." "She did," George confirmed. "And she's scared." "She says someone followed her last week. They found her," Layla said quietly. George stepped forward. "She's willing to meet, but she wants to do it quietly. No cameras, no attention. She'd give us the footage, but only in person." Layla stood up. "Then we go now." George hesitated. "It could be dangerous." Layla looked at her son. "It's already dangerous." "But I'm not hiding anymore." Outside in the rain, a black car was already waiting again. And somewhere across the ocean, in a high-security office, Prime Minister Zahid stood watching the broadcast replay, his face expressionless. A man in a military uniform entered and said, "Sir, she's still alive." Zahid narrowed his eyes. Then she must be silenced. The rain hadn't stopped. In fact, it was falling harder, now thick, cold sheets soaking the dark streets. The black car moved silently through London, carrying Layla and George toward the secret meeting spot. The city blurred past them, a mess of lights and shadows. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, George looked at her. Sophia picked. A public place, a train station cafe, cameras, people, exits. Layla nodded. She knows how this works. She stared out the window. Her hands were clenched on her lap. Her body was tired, but her mind was racing. Every second felt like a countdown. "She's risking everything," Layla said. "She's still inside. The system, if they catch her with that video..." George cut in gently. "We won't let that happen." But Layla didn't believe in promises anymore. At that same moment across the city, Sophia Rahman sat at the edge of a cafe booth. She wore a gray coat and a cap pulled low over her eyes. Her laptop bag sat tightly at her side. Inside was the flash drive that could burn the world down. She glanced at the clock, 8 minutes to go. She stirred her tea with a trembling hand. Every time the door opened, she flinched. She knew what the video showed Zahid in a private meeting with a Russian operative, listing off names of journalists to be eliminated, speaking casually about weapons disguised as food shipments. His voice clear, his face unmistakable. Remembered when Layla gave it to her? If I don't make it, Layla had said, you'll know when to use it. That time had come. Sophia looked up as the door opened again. Layla walked in, soaked but composed. George followed close behind. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither said a word. Then Sophia stood and they hugged quick, tight, like people who didn't trust time. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Sophia whispered. You almost didn't, Layla replied. Sophia pulled out the flash drive and placed it on the table. It was plain silver, with no label, but it felt like a grenade. It's all on there, Sophia said. The meeting, the accounts, the orders, everything. George leaned forward, carefully picking it up. We'll need to verify it, secure it, and prepare to air it. Once it's public, he won't be able to deny it. Sophia nodded, but her hands shook. There's something else. George raised an eyebrow. I think they found me last night, Sophia said. My building door was open, nothing stolen, just moved, like a warning. Layla went pale. They're here. Suddenly, outside the cafe, a black SUV pulled up and parked across the street. Layla's heart dropped. It's not press, she whispered. George stood up. We're leaving now. Sophia grabbed her bag and followed. They exited quickly, walking toward the back of the station. George signaled to a security escort waiting nearby. But then, an explosion. The blast came from the underground parking garage of the newsroom building miles away. Flames shot into the sky. Sirens echoed. Reporters ran. Screens inside the cafe changed breaking. BOMB hits Global Current Affairs headquarters. George's earpiece buzzed. A voice shouted it was targeted. Car bomb. No injuries yet, but equipment is destroyed. We've been hit. They're trying to silence us, George said. Layla's phone vibrated. A message. No sender. You talk, he disappears. Her face turned white. My son, she whispered. He's gone. She tried calling the nurse. No answer. I left him with your staff. George was already making calls. Lock down every floor. Find him. Panic shot through Layla like fire. Her knees went weak. Sophia held her up. They took him, Layla said, to shut me up. George grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. We're going to get him back. But you can't stop now. That's what they want. Tears filled her eyes. He's all I have. I know, George said. But this video, this true, that's your only weapon now. They rushed into a nearby building, a temporary safe house. George handed the flash drive to a trusted technician. Make a secure copy, triple backup. Air if anything happens to us. The team worked fast. As the news of the bombing spread, public attention doubled. Thousands began demanding answers. Who was behind it? Why now? News outlets outside Zahid's influence started picking up Layla's interview. Footage of her face, her words, her warnings. The Prime Minister's office issued a cold statement. These are false allegations from a mentally unstable woman. We urge media outlets to stop giving oxygen to political fiction. But inside Zahid's private office, chaos was building. Major Hamid Qureshi entered. He looked tense. She's alive. The video exists and it's about to go public. Zahid's jaw tightened. Find the child, use him, and the mother. Zahid's voice was ice. She won't disappear. Quietly, then we make her a monster. The rain finally stopped, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. The city looked frozen gray, quiet, waiting. Layla sat in the corner of a dark room inside a new safe house. Her eyes fixed on the single image glowing on her phone screen. Her son, tied to a chair, fear in his eyes. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. George entered quietly, carrying a small cup of coffee and a folder. He set them down on the table in front of her. Interpol's involved now, he said. They're watching airports. Border alerts are live. We think your son is still in the country. Allah didn't respond. George sat across from her. We also traced the signal from the photo. It came from a burner phone, untraceable. but it pinged once just for a second somewhere outside Manchester. Layla's voice was low. They're not going to give him back unless I stay quiet. But if we stay quiet, they win, George replied. He opened the folder. Inside was a printed photo of Zahid sitting at a long wooden table, his face serious, his voice captured in mid-sentence. That's from the video Sophia gave us. He said, "It's real, Layla." He names targets, journalists, judges, even someone from the UN. Layla looked at the image for a long moment. Then she stood. "I want the world to see it," she said. "Everything." George nodded. "Our team is preparing a special broadcast. We're calling it The Evidence Vault. We'll air the footage, verify the data, and tie it to real-world consequences. But we need your voice to guide it." Layla took a deep breath. "I'll do it." Downstairs, technicians were editing the footage, matching faces, overlaying subtitles, verifying voice. Prince? A small security team now guarded every entrance to the building. The network's legal team prepared for the storm. Meanwhile, in Zahid's capital city, the first cracks began to show. A former cabinet member gave an anonymous interview confirming that Layla had once lived in the prime minister's residence. Protesters gathered outside government offices, holding signs that read, "Where is Layla's child? Truth cannot be exiled." News of the bombing in London made headlines. In Europe and the US, NATO issued a statement of concern. The UN Human Rights Council scheduled an emergency meeting. Zahid was furious. He stormed through his war room shouting orders. Shut down all foreign press inside the country. Block the broadcast. Anyone who shares it, jail them. Spra, his advisors were quiet. "We've tracked Sophia Rahman," said Major Qureshi. "She's in London. Want me to send a team?" Zahid's eyes narrowed. "No, that's too obvious. Break her from the inside." He turned to the screen where Layla's interview replayed in silence. "She was never strong enough to face me," he muttered. "She won't finish this." But back in London, Layla was preparing to do exactly that. The next night, at exactly 9 p.m. London time, the global broadcast began. The title card read, "The Evidence Vault, Layla Khan's Story." Millions tuned in. The screen faded to black. Then a voiceover from George began. "Tonight, you will see never-before-released footage that may reveal one of the most dangerous political conspiracies of the last 20 years. Viewer discretion is advised." The video played. Zahid sat in a private meeting room surrounded by shadowy figures. He spoke in a calm, low voice. Names were listed. Countries mentioned, amounts discussed. Layla's voice followed. "This is what he didn't want you to see. These are the men he funded, the reporters he silenced, the families he broke. This is how war becomes business." Evidence scrolled across the screen: bank logs, military transfers, communications intercepted by diplomats. Across the world, reactions exploded. The European Parliament called for sanctions. A South American news anchor burst into tears on air. In Zahid's own country, internet firewalls collapsed under the pressure. People shared the broadcast anyway. Layla sat in the control room watching the storm unfold. Her hands were clenched. Her heart was in her throat. Then the technician beside her turned. "We've got a message," he said. "It's from Sophia. She found something." The screen flashed with a new file. It had been buried in an old folder, encrypted, forgotten. When decrypted, it showed security footage from a train station 2 nights ago. Layla leaned in. There, clear as day, was her son being led by 2 men into a black van. Behind them, unnoticed until now, was a third figure. Major Qureshi. Layla stood. "He's here." George looked stunned. "Qureshi? In London? He must have come for the boy himself," Layla said. "That means Zahid's scared." George made a call to local intelligence. "We need airport surveillance. Every van with diplomatic plates. Track this man now." 2 hours later, the image appeared. A small building on the edge of the city. Owned under a fake NGO. The last ping from the van's GPS was from that location. George turned to Layla. "If we go now, we can get him." She didn't hesitate. "Let's go." An unmarked car pulled up to the safe house. Inside were two trusted officers from British intelligence. Armed, silent, ready. The drive was long and tense. Layla stared out the window. "Do you think he'll be there?" George didn't answer right away. "He knows we've cornered him. This might be his last move." They pulled up to the abandoned building. Rain had started again. Thunder rumbled. In the distance, the officers moved in first. Quiet flashlights cutting through the darkness. Then a voice from inside. "Don't shoot. Don't shoot." It was Major Qureshi. He was on his knees, bleeding from the arm. Inside, Layla ran past the guards. And there, in the back room, shivering but alive, was her son. He looked up. "Mama." Layla dropped to her knees, arms around him, tears falling for the first time in days. Outside, as Qureshi was taken into custody, George called the studio, "Put me on air." "We've got him. The boy is safe." That night, the headlines changed. "Truth survives. Layla Khan reunited with son. Zahid's circle begins to fall." But for Layla, it wasn't about headlines. It was about the moment her son looked into her eyes and whispered, "You found me." And for the first time in years, she finally believed she could win. The world didn't sleep that night. News of the rescue spread fast. Footage of Layla holding her son, stepping out of the dark building into the rain, went viral within minutes. She was wrapped in a blanket. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't speak to the cameras. She only held her son, whispering into his hair as flashes exploded around them. The headlines were relentless. Layla's son found alive, Major Zahid ally. Captured in UK. Global reactions pour in after release of evidence. Vault world leaders break silence on Zahid's alleged war crimes in Washington. The Secretary of State held a late press briefing. "We are deeply disturbed by the evidence presented by Ms. Khan and Global Current Affairs. The U.S. is reviewing all diplomatic ties with Prime Minister Zahid's government." In Brussels, NATO issued an emergency vote. By morning, Zahid's country had been suspended from several defense meetings. In Zahid's capital, the government tried to regain control. Internet blackouts rolled across the country. Protesters were arrested, but the fire had already started. University students marched in silence with signs that read, "We believe Layla, our prime minister, is a liar. Release the truth, step down." For the first time, members of Zahid's own parliament broke ranks. One called for a public investigation. Another demanded Zahid resign immediately. At the same time, Layla and her son were moved to a high-security location, a temporary government safe house just outside London. He was tired but unharmed. He asked for toys, then pancakes. Layla smiled for the first time in days as she made him breakfast with trembling hands. George arrived later that morning with new updates. "We now have full confirmation," he said. Interpol has issued a red notice for Zahid's inner circle, including Qureshi. The UN is drafting a resolution to freeze Zahid's overseas assets. Layla listened quietly. "There's something else," he added. "The Prime Minister just announced a press conference. In 1 hour, it's being aired globally." Layla's hands stopped moving. "He's going to spin this," she said. "Blame foreign actors. Call me unstable. Maybe even say the video was fake." George nodded, "But we're ready." The network had prepared its next move. A full digital dump of the evidence vault, backed by independent verification. Every document, every frame, open to public access. They were no longer reporting a story. They were unleashing a movement. An hour later, the world watched Zahid step up to a podium. His face was tight, his voice slow. "These accusations," he began, "are part of a global conspiracy to weaken our government. My former wife is a mentally disturbed individual. She has been manipulated by foreign agents and hostile networks." He paused. The video is a fabrication, but almost immediately, fact-checkers tore his words apart. Voice experts confirmed the recording as authentic. The location matched a known safe house near the border. One of the Russian men in the clip had already been sanctioned by the UN, and then the final blow. Sophia Roman, previously silent, stepped forward in a separate press statement. She identified herself publicly for the first time and confirmed under oath that the video was real. She provided timestamps, original file metadata, and a sworn declaration that Layla had handed her the footage in 2012. There was no coming back. Zahid's approval rating collapsed. Inside his government, ministers began to disappear. Some fled. Some were detained by their own intelligence services trying to protect the state. Military generals held secret meetings. And then the most dramatic moment yet. The sun was out. It was the first clear morning London had seen in weeks. No rain, no gray clouds. Just warm light pouring across the rooftops. Layla stood by the window of a quiet countryside cottage, an undisclosed safe house, far from the city. Her son was curled up on the couch behind her, fast asleep. His chest rising and falling in peace. She had barely slept the night before. Prime Minister Rafiq Saeed had been detained by his own military. The world watched in shock as armored vehicles surrounded the Prime Minister's residence. There was no gunfire, no last speech, just a simple message from the interim military leadership to preserve national stability. The Prime Minister has been taken into protective custody pending investigation. The images were surreal. Zahid, once seen as a powerful, untouchable leader, now pale and silent, escorted down the marble steps of his palace with his hands behind his back. George Arnault arrived. Mid-morning, he stepped inside the cottage carrying a folder to phones and a laptop. "He's gone," he said simply. Layla turned around. "Is he being charged?" George nodded. "War crimes, conspiracy, illegal arms trade, attempted kidnapping, and attempted murder. Multiple countries want jurisdiction. Interpol's building a case." Layla was silent for a moment. "Will there be a trial?" "There will," George said. "Public, televised. The world will see everything." He placed the folder on the table. "But that's not why I came." She opened it slowly. Inside were official papers from 3 governments, offering permanent asylum and full protection. One included her son's name as a dependent. "You have choices now," George said. "You can stay here or go somewhere new. Start over." Layla's fingers lingered on the pages. "I never thought I'd live long enough to have choices," she said. He smiled gently. "You earned them." Outside, the world was still reacting. In Zahid's country, protests turned into celebrations. Statues were pulled down. Citizens chanted Layla's name in the streets. Journalists she once feared were now publicly thanking her for exposing the truth. Social media had turned her into something larger than herself, a symbol, not of revenge, but of courage, strength, survival. The evidence vault had been downloaded over 100 million times. Universities began building study programs around it. Law schools analyzed it. War crime investigators had already sent requests to interview Layla directly. She declined them all. For now, she just wanted quiet. But the story wasn't over yet. That evening, George invited her back for one final broadcast. Not in a studio, not with bright lights. Just a camera, 2 chairs, and silence. Layla agreed. The broadcast opened with no music, no graphics. Just George and Layla sitting across from each other on a wooden deck in the countryside. George looked into the camera. "We began this journey 3 weeks ago with a name, a woman few remembered and none could find. Tonight, she needs no introduction." He turned to Layla. "Why did you decide to speak again?" he asked. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye," she replied. "To the world?" "No," she said softly. "To fear." She paused. "For years, I lived like a shadow. I became invisible to survive. But in doing so, I almost forgot who I was. Speaking out wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering what he did, what I saw, what I refused to let happen again. George nodded. Do you? Feel safe now. She looked toward the horizon. I don't know what safe really means anymore, she said. But I feel seen. That's something. What do you want people to remember? Layla took a deep breath. Truth is slow. It takes time to rise. It gets buried under power, politics, money, but it never disappears. It waits. And when it comes back, it's louder than any lie. There was a long silence. Then George asked the final question. What's next for you? Layla smiled for the first time in the entire broadcast. I'm going to raise my son. I'm going to teach him that silence is not the same as peace. And when he's older, I'll tell him everything. Not so he'll be angry, but so he'll be brave. Screen faded to black. One sentence appeared. Layla Khan is now under international protection. Her testimony has been accepted into the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal. And another. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that refused to stay silent. The broadcast ended. Across the world, people stood and applauded. In their living rooms, a bookstore in Istanbul placed Layla's story in the front window. A mural appeared on a wall in Johannesburg, a mother holding her son, both rising from flames. But Layla wasn't watching. She sat outside her cottage, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, listening to her son laugh from the garden. And for the first time in a decade, there was no microphone, no fear, no running, just sunlight, soft earth under her feet, and the feeling that her voice finally had changed the world.